Headlines this morning. Join us right here every weekday morning at 7:30 Pacific, 10:30 Eastern for all of your quick takes and to get your day started off right. So this morning, Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers is asking Donald Trump to stay away from Wisconsin. So as you know, protests have erupted in Kenosha, Wisconsin as a result of the officer-related killing of Jacob Blake. Good morning, Jason Carter. Good morning. Good to see you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. So Blake was shot in the back by police officers last week 7 times, and he was facing away from the police officers. This was captured on video, of course, and it caused an erupted protests in that city. And people are very upset. The Black Lives Matter protesters are very upset, as are Americans across the country, about what appears to be another murder of a person of color by police officers in a show of extreme police force and police brutality. And so what's going on is that more violence has erupted. So Donald Trump and the Republican Party have taken to the news to denounce this violence, of course, claiming to be the law and order presidency, claiming that Blue Lives Matter, of course. And so what this has really done is that it has incited additional violence in these cities that have ongoing protests demanding racial justice. And so Donald Trump is planning on visiting Wisconsin and addressing this violence, but what he's really doing is he's encouraging additional violence. As we know, Jacob Rittenhouse was the young 17-year-old in Kenosha, Wisconsin, who showed up, young white man who showed up at Black Lives Matter protests and the protests demanding justice for Jacob Blake. And he came with an AR-15, and he ended up shooting 2 people and injuring a third. This is a young man who has been photographed at Donald Trump rallies as early as January of this year in Des Moines, Iowa. He's somebody who's been radicalized by the language that's been coming out of the Trump administration, and it's a perfect example of why and how fear incites violence. And so when the president gets up and he fearmongers and he talks about carnage in American cities and how democratic cities are, degrading into chaos, then what it's really doing is it's activating young people like Mr. Rittenhouse to encourage violence in those cities. And it's not the first that's happened. Now we have these Trump caravans that are attending protests in major cities and sort of instigating violence with the Black Lives Matter protesters. One protester was killed on Saturday in Portland, Oregon, as a large caravan of Trump supporters and Black Lives Matter protests began to clash. So the Trump caravan came to the Black Lives Matter protests in Portland, Oregon, to basically, cause a little bit of chaos and instigate this violence. So this is a problem. This American vigilante justice is not new. In Michigan, we had armed protesters with guns stay at the Michigan House, threatening to incite violence and kill Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who was merely trying to implement a mask policy, and that was because of Donald Trump's anti-mask rhetoric that has been coming out of the Trump administration, and this rhetoric that Democrats are coming to take away your liberties and your freedoms will, of course, necessarily result in people taking arms and threatening violence. And he is encouraging and hoping that this violence escalates, because then Mr. Trump gets to depict this violence as being Joe Biden's America and the Democrats and the Democratic cities degrading into chaos. Now, the problem with this is that, and what is really quite genius, if I may, of a political tactic by by Mr. Trump, although anyone with two eyes might be able to notice what a disingenuous tactic it is that this is Donald Trump's America. Donald Trump is currently president of the United States. So when he tries to paint this as being Joe Biden's America, it's a little bit quizzical. It's a little bit odd because, of course, Donald Trump is president, and it's not the first time that he's incited violence against people for political gain. He has called the media, the enemy of the people, and calls them fake news. He drums up conspiracist accusations against people. We had a media room, a small media newsroom that was shut up by somebody 2 years ago because because of this rhetoric that the media is the enemy of the people. So when he gets to the RNC stage last week and he paints Democrats, along with his son Don Jr. and Don Jr.'s girlfriend Kimberly Guilfoyle, they paint American cities as descending into chaos, as the Democrats want to take away your liberty and American carnage. This is rhetoric that's been pounded into you over and over again. And, you know, that's a problem. We have a comment, Megan Valentine, I'm sure this is by the direction from Trump's boss Putin, on how to use the people against each other. Yes, which is great that you brought that up because there's been concerning news about Russia. Now, the Democratic Party in Congress is very upset because the Office of the Director of National Intelligence announced just over the weekend that they will cut off congressional briefings on election security, which is, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has called it a, quote, shocking abdication of its lawful responsibility and a, quote, betrayal of the public's right to know how foreign powers are trying to subvert our democracy. So that's National Intelligence Director John Ratcliffe, who alerted the Senate and the House that he will no longer provide in-person briefings. So as we know, all the intelligence agencies have been ringing the alarm again in this current election cycle that the Russians are working to interfere with the 2020 U.S. presidential election, the same way that they did in 2016 to benefit Donald Trump's election by hurting Hillary Clinton. They are now in an attempt working towards and attempting to harm the presidential election of Joe Biden. And they do this through social media messaging, and they do it in a very sophisticated way by infiltrating social media groups, social media pages, and proliferating bots and trolls who send out a stream of messaging that is anti-Joe Biden. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of this anti-Joe Biden language, this is Joe Biden's America, may be coming from Russian bots. Groovy John says Trump is a con man. Lucia says hello. Thank you so much for joining. Someone seems to think that back to the Russian collusion, LMAFAO. You don't need to take my word for it. A bipartisan Senate panel came to the same conclusion that Trump received and was benefited from Russian interference in the 2016 election. It's not a hoax. The Mueller report also told you this. All 17 U.S. intelligence agencies have told us this. So if you don't believe it, it might be because you're listening to Trump's language and rhetoric, which is, of course, the problem. And I am sorry that facts do not matter in 2020, but they should. So in terms of this violence, so Trump is planning on coming to Kenosha, Wisconsin on Tuesday. The governor, Tony Evers, has basically said, please do not come. He has asked him to not come. And what do you guys think? Should Donald Trump be exploiting violence for his own political gain? As I said, he is very interested in this violence continuing and inciting it and encouraging it so that he can then take it and use it as propaganda for his 2020 election chances. So yes, the Trump administration is planning on coming out to survey the damage of Kenosha, Wisconsin. Of course, these demonstrations happening there are about police brutality and systemic racism, but the only people that were killed in Kenosha, Wisconsin were the Black Lives Matter protesters at the hands of Mr. Kyle Rittenhouse, who is a pro-Trump supporter. So this violence is continuing, and it's happening under Donald Trump's watch. Donald Trump refuses to address Kyle Rittenhouse and the violence that happened at his hands, so he's very willing to talk about the violence that occurs in very small segmented pieces of this and paint it as it being the overall larger picture, as if violence is the norm at these protests, which of course they are not. The violence is a very small sampling of what you're seeing, but it's being exploded by the Trump administration as being the overall picture. And of course, it really is not. These protests are primarily peaceful. Someone's calling me a liar. I'm sorry, my pants are not on fire. I fear this election, Chris Drago says, is going to produce bloodshed like we have never seen before. And someone calls me a journalist or a Democratic operative. I am a journalist with an opinion. So that is that. He shouldn't go to Kenosha for his personal gain. I don't think he should come here. He's going to make things worse, says Amagordo. I don't think that he should either. I don't think that Donald Trump is helping matters. I think the mayor of Portland, Portland's Mayor Wheeler, said yesterday, take it from Portland Mayor Wheeler, who told us yesterday that Trump is causing this violence, that Trump, the problem is you, and that he is encouraging this violence. So I think many people agree with you that his objective is for this violence to continue. He's encouraging it for his own political gain, and that is not okay. So thank you for joining this morning on the AM Report with Perhaps News, the network of now. I am live right here every weekday morning at 7:30 Pacific, 10:30 Eastern. You can sponsor this journalism at haps.tv/@Alex Mohajer. It has been a pleasure, and we